Hey everyone, Florida Man here. All right, so this is my fourth attempt at trying to make this video and trying to give you guys some cohesive idea of my thoughts. It's been fun and interesting, and it's good training for me. It's good because I haven't had to do this in a long time. Talk about politics, and I thoroughly enjoy it. But first off, just to kind of give you an idea, what is this video going to be talking about? I'm going to be talking about the peace deals. I don't know why I said it like that. I made it sound kind of nice because I don't think it is going to be nice. And I'm going to be talking about video games. I'm going to be talking about video games and specifically 4X and a particular game in the 4X genre called Europa Universalis 4, EU4. Shout out to any of my Paradox fans out there. Um, you guys are probably wondering, what the hell are you talking about, Ben? And I understand you. So please follow along with me for a bit. I'll try to get this into a better scope. I have failed in previous videos to give a proper scope and a proper idea about what I'm trying to do here. So, seriously now, we're talking about peace in Ukraine. We know that Trump and Putin are in talks now. They want to meet. They want to talk about peace. And there's a couple things in this video I want us to talk about. And the key idea that I want to make a clear definition of the difference between war and conflict. And I'm going to use this video game that I mentioned earlier, EU4, as the way for us to examine war and conflict and their differences. And I'm going to talk a good bit about this game, guys, and the mechanics that this game implements to try to convey certain ideas, and how this really works in reality, and how basically this works. So basically, what is EU4? Sorry, guys, I'm going to go to the game. I got to explain this game first and the key mechanics and how we relate to this in the reality that we live in. So in EU4, basically, the easiest explanation I could give anyone who has no idea when I say the word paradox game or 4X, it means it's risk. It is risk on like ungodly steroids. EU4 has been out for a decade now, I think, and every year it gets an update and expansion, and there's an absurd amount of mechanics. It's a great historical game that you can spend an ungodly amount of time on. I have during COVID, and basically the game is trying to like simulate the world from 1444 all the way to like 1815 or something, to like the Napoleonic era. So you have this way big thing of history, and you could play any nation across the entire world, and they all have their own little mechanics, their own little special history moments. But in regards, basically, you take army stacks, you build an army, and you have your neighbors, and then you can make claims on those neighbors, and then you conquer their lands, and then you get the resources, the taxes, and then you use that to build bigger armies and get more technology and do da da da. And basically you try to become an empire. It's you get to play little empire games if you want to be an empire. And so why am I talking about all this stuff? And when it comes to the world right now, basically there are key mechanics in the game that they have tried to implement to simulate like real world responses. Because I'm going to use the term blobbing. We use the term blobbing in the game, and that's basically like, let's say if you play as France, what's stopping France from like eating up all these other states around them? If you are a single player, you can save scum. You can go in the past and you can change your past actions to fix your future actions. You can plan. You can actually plan. Video games currently do not have like general intelligence AI. There's just a bunch of scripts and weights, and the player's job is to figure out how to dismantle those and kind of overwhelm them in certain areas, right? But tangent there. As the game developers, they want to simulate the real world. And, the real world is basically, if you see all your neighbors getting eaten by this giant blob, what are you going to do? One, you could try to appease the blob, but generally they know that's not going to work because you're a small state, and what's really stopping them from eating you in the long term? The only thing that's going to stop them from getting eaten is to find allies. It's to find allies and then to make, a coalition against you. And so the key mechanic in the game, there's something called aggression. So I'm going to use the example of, let's say I am a member of the Holy Roman Empire. I am the state of Brandenburg. And I can conquer to the east or I can conquer to the west. Well, let's look at it this way. To the east is Poland. All right. And into the west is like Saxony and some others like Ulm and other smaller Holy Roman Empire states. Now, cool mechanic, and this is how it actually works in reality. It's really cool and interesting thing. If I was to try to conquer to the west, if I try to conquer another fellow Holy Roman Empire state, who do you think that's really going to piss off? Is it really going to piss off Poland? No, not so much. Poland might be like, all right, you're smaller than me. You're still a shrimp fry. I don't really care. But it's going to piss off all the rest of the Holy Roman Empire. And there's mechanics. There's a bunch of mechanics preventing you as a Holy Roman Empire state from just blobbing, from just you eating up all the other small Holy Roman Empire states around you. And you get absurd aggression very fast. If you just try to conquer one province in the HRE, you immediately get a coalition of HRE members against you. And like whoever the head of the Holy Roman Empire is, he's like, look, I'm going to go to war with you unless you return that province to whoever it was previously owned to. Or you give it to me because, something happened to the previous heir. So now it's the Holy Roman Empire's land. Fun mechanics like that. So it entices you then to invade to the east or to play a lot of diplomacy in the west. And so basically, getting back to the mechanic of aggression, and basically what we're seeing with Russia, or how you go about this. How do you deal with aggression then? One, there's a cooldown timer. There is a cooldown timer. So maybe you can take small chunks. You don't go for the entire state. You don't go for an entire nation. You go for a province or two. You take one province or two provinces, and then, you let the timer go by. You let time pass by, and relations will start seeing those negative numbers slowly go down until they're back to some sort of neutral. Of course, they might just change their stance towards you. They might just change their stance saying that, there's always going to be, a negative modifier to your relationship with them. They're always going to view you as, predatory. And, by predatory now, all your diplomatic relations have, a negative 100 or something like that. But, this is a way for them to try to reenact real world and how real states would respond when countries try to blob. And this is very much so in today's world. And you can say we've become hypersensitive to expansion. And also because we now live in a global world, we don't really, your impact of aggression now matters across the entire world. I think the first thing that Russia did was Russia decided to invade Georgia. That should have been the wake-up call to the West to be like, whoa, all right, what's going on here? We did not fully realize what game Russia was playing. And that's what I'm going to go back to, is that Russia's playing a different game than the West, than most Western states. Russia is back to playing EU4. The West is now past that. They played Vicky 2. They passed Hearts of Iron. Now they're in the current world simulator, where I think the game is primarily based on economic development and internal stability. That is a Western state's focus. That's the game they're playing. Is trying to figure, how do I keep my city, or how do I keep my internal stability? They're not too focused on the external anymore. They're more focused on keeping internal stability. Not for Putin. Putin's playing EU4. He is entirely focused on external. That fucker doesn't give a shit about his infrastructure. All right. Just think about that. How much more time he could spend focusing on internal development and expert. And that's why we don't need this sort of wars anymore, because there's so much we can do internally. We don't need this external expansion. Whole other video. Sorry, guys, I was going into. But, this should have been the canary in the coal mine for us, was the Georgia invasion. And basically, we needed to understand that Putin's mindset has changed. We are now in conflict with Putin because Putin now wants to expand. And how Putin is going to do this is he's going to apply the same strategy, where basically you don't go all at once. You don't do an all at once try to take over. Now, he did try that in Ukraine, right? He tried this in Ukraine recently. But let's think about at the beginning in 2014 with the Maidan revolution. And he took Crimea and the Donetsk. And he might have tried to take more, but his state wasn't just physically capable. The Russian military was just not capable of actually taking more land. And we kind of still said, oh, bad Putin. And what did we do? We kind of gave him some sanctions. I believe we did do some sanctions, but we kind of kept him in, we didn't treat him as the pariah state that we thought. And, you could say that's a failure of Obama. I didn't think about that. That was a failure on me. I was like, all right, well, that's kind of weird. And that can go with our lack of knowledge of Ukraine and our lack of knowledge of Eastern Europe. And our previous ideas that, well, it's all Soviet. And so maybe they do have some recognition to the power of that land. Obviously, I do not believe that now. And that was just a very ignorant stance of view of an American's view of that situation at the time. That has changed drastically because now we had the full scale invasion. And like I said, Putin excels where basically, think about this too. You can have reasons for war in the game. There's also this, the cause belli. You need a cause belli to go to war with another nation. Usually it's claims. You need a claim. Maybe it could be dynastic. Maybe it could be territorial. Maybe it could be a trade war. You have all these different scenarios, different wars, and you have different goals and different objectives and certain things you can get. Russia's full, and so you could say like the Maidan Revolution was like proxy rebellious state that Russia propped up, the little green men. There we go. So it had some ambiguity, and it didn't cause the amount of aggression that we should have let it cause. It should have caused a lot more aggression in the West. We should have been like, oh my God, that's properly Russia. But that was Russia like skirting like just the very edges of what could be considered plausible deniability, and we accepted that. And we could have chosen not to. We didn't have to. We saw the writing on the wall. We're not AI. We're not programmed to say, oh, well, technically, I mean, we're states. And I think that's one thing we should learn from Trump is that sometimes, guys, don't let the game kill you. Don't let this game kill you. If you see the writing on the wall, what's going to happen, and you need to break that rule, break the fucking rule, okay? Another tangent, another story. Sorry, but going back. So what's currently happening? Sorry, we're 11 minutes in. I haven't talked about the peace deal yet and how this goes into the game mechanics. So Putin wants peace now, it seems, or at least he's up to the talks of peace. And it's very important to understand who is Putin talking to. Putin is talking to the U.S. Putin is talking to this. He's not talking to Ukraine. And Trump is talking to Putin. And how does this work into the game mechanic? Like I said, if you're a small state and you want to protect yourself from a bigger blob that's forming, you find another blob. You find another blob, and then you have those two blobs kind of fight over, that's how you maintain your peace. You have a coalition of states either. And it seems like the U.S. doesn't want to protect Europe. The U.S. definitely doesn't want to protect Ukraine. And so now we're in this awkward state where it seems like Ukraine's going to need to find other allies, and Ukraine's going to need to create a coalition without the U.S. And I think that's like the big thing now is that like the U.S. was we had Pax America, if that's a term we can use in IR theory. We had Pax America after World War II, where basically the U.S. went about creating the world order with its Western partners. And basically, we created this system where in general, we had world peace and we didn't have world wars. All right. Yes, there were proxy wars. There was Cold Wars. There was instability, revolutions in the global South, let's say. And that was very disruptive for other people. But we didn't have major powers fighting each other, which is a big accomplishment. All right. It's not perfect, but it was an accomplishment. And now it seems like Trump wants to get rid of all that. Trump wants to get rid of all that because he himself wants the blob. He himself wants Canada and Greenland and Panama. He's done with his current stupid, internal stability game and he wants to go back. He has nostalgia for EU4 or Vicky. I would say Vicky. He wants to play Vicky. He wants to play Vicky too. All right, I want to play Vicky too. I haven't played Vicky 2 in many years, but he wants to go back to that game. All right, he wants to go back to a different game. He wants to play a different game. And so that's very unsettling for Europe. And for my European audience, you guys, I think the Finnish prime minister said it best, was that Europe needs to wake up historically. It needs to wake up from its slumber of history, and it needs to be proactive. It is very unsettling. It's very disappointing to see Europe not come up with some sort of policy or some sort of meeting, some sort of talk, conference when Trump was elected president. They needed a talk. Because I think they're far more intelligent people, and I think there's far more competent people right now in Europe's administration, foreign policy area that they kind of understand, like they see the writing on the wall. But I think they're, sorry, I'm not EU politics guy, but they need to have some competency and understanding, like, all right, we need to come together because the guy who was the glue of the coalition, America, they're gone. They're done. Maybe it's only for 4 years. Maybe it's for more. We don't know. But we need to now understand that America is no longer the binding agent for this world order and is going to set about to dismantle this world order. is going to survive in the sense of who's going to hold their groups together. And so Europe, that's you guys, all right? You guys need to come up with something now. You guys need to be Ukraine security guarantee now. You guys need to be able to form a cohesive bond that Putin will not be able to break. And that's where I go into the back to the game mechanic. If I am the blob and I want to keep growing, obviously, the skilled player, their challenge isn't outwitting the AI in battle. Their challenge is deconstructing the diplomatic wall that has been built against them. It's to dismantle that diplomatic wall of the coalition wall. That's your goal. That's a skilled player in EU4, and that's when the game's over. When you dismantle that wall, the game's over because you've blobbed enough, you've built enough momentum, you're big enough. Nothing else matters. No one can ever challenge you again. The goal is to dismantle that diplomatic coalition wall that's been built up to prevent you from being over aggressive. So this is where I'm afraid, because this is where Putin excels. Putin does not excel at warfare. It's very clear Russia does not excel at warfare. But they excel at destabilization. The Russian state excels at destabilization. And we're finally going back to war and conflict. If Ukraine does end up in a peace deal with Russia, there needs to be very clear, and the idea why we always said Ukraine needs to be in NATO is because NATO gives the guarantee of being in a blockchain of a coalition that would prevent it from being able to be absorbed by a blob, by the Russian blob primarily, right? That's what we're talking about. And so the US says no, they're not going to be a part of NATO. They can have EU members in there. They can have European allies in there. That might be a part of it. But yet again, all right, Putin, and this is the fun part, or maybe this can work out, maybe this doesn't. Putin probably has the belief that he knows that he can't stand up to the US military. And if US military bases are there, it's probably going to be there for a very long time. And maybe Trump's only there for 4 years, and then there's like something else, and we get like back to regular policy and whatever. And then, they're like, yes, we're having boots on the ground there. Putin might take this offer. Putin might say, all right, we're okay with the U.S. We get a binding agreement that the U.S., because if it's the European states, well, we can excel at destabilizing the particular states, the politics. We could destabilize the politics of the states that choose to actually defend, Ukraine. So let's say if we get France, the UK, Poland, maybe. If those three states give a guarantee of troop security, like they send troops into Ukraine, maybe Putin would be like, all right, I bet we can probably get France and the UK. Poland, I don't know. Maybe Poland's played this game long enough. It doesn't matter who you get in politics in Poland. It doesn't matter the relation with Ukraine. They just hate Russia, all right? And they understand the situation. But they might be like, all right, maybe we can take Poland on. Maybe we can do something. Maybe we just have to wait till Poland. And that's the thing. Who's behind the computer screen, in this game right now? In the U.S. and U.S. Western democracies, we're always changing our leaders. And with Russia, who has it been for the past, 18 years? I'm sorry, guys. I'm not good with my Russian history. But I know it's been well over a decade, almost 2 decades maybe. It's been Putin. It's the same guy playing the same damn game. His idea of what he can wait for is far longer than what we can think we can wait for in Western. And so being able to change that. And I guess I can go into one of my stories. Let me give my example of the story, because we're at this point now. I played a multiplayer game of EU4, and there was 150 players. This is my first game. And my objective was to survive the first round. So every week we do a 3-hour round. And my goal was I want to survive the first round. If I can survive the first round, if people have been playing this game like this for a while, I'm happy. And I somehow ended up in South Asia. My nation I got was in South Asia. And basically, I did know nothing about the meta of South Asia politics, about starting at the game, who goes who tries to go after what countries, whatever. But I ended up playing where basically there's just 2 major states and there's a bunch of minor states. And right out the gate, we were like, all right, the game objective as a minor state is to get those 2 big states to go against each other and to kind of like take bits off of the state, like to pick a side of the major states, right? go to war with that other major state, and then try to chew off bits of that bigger state so you yourself become a little bigger, and so you yourself become, you can make your own independent policy because you become like a stronger country. Well, that scenario, because all the minor states, we all got together, we're all trying to talk to each other. And then like one of them comes in, and this is all in Discord. Like 2/3 of the game is in Discord chats, and it's all about diplomacy. Before we even start the round, half of the game, like it's just diplomacy. And they come in, they say, those two guys made an alliance. You're like, what? And this is like Nazi Germany and USSR making an alliance and being like the Eastern European states in between. And you're like, fuck. And so basically what we end up doing is we just make a coalition. We're all big enough and strong enough. So I'm like South Asia, like Pakistan kind of. And we have like a coalition from there all the way up to like Nepal. And so, yeah, we have like the two major states on both sides. And now what we do is, of course, is we just daisy chain. And so now we're going to the guy to the west of our nation, that guy. And we're like, hey, it's the Timurids. Oh, fuck yeah, let's get the Timurids on our side. All right, Timurids, can you help our alliance, our coalition? He's like, yeah, sure, I got you guys. And then we have this other guy on the other side. We're like, can you help us? Like, yeah, sure, we got you. Because, yeah, we don't want these guys to blob. We don't want them to consolidate their power because obviously they can't attack East because they have us. And we have all these minor states and we could just harass them. But so what we successfully did our first round was has a peaceful, there were 0 wars. There were 0 wars in our first round. No one expanded, no one conquered anything. And I was like, cool, I survived my first round. But the second round, before the second round started, I lost. And what happened? 2 of the players that were in our coalition, they left. They were like, I'm done playing. I see the writing on the wall. I know what's going to happen. So they left. And guess what happened? 2 new players said, hey, we got 2 open seats. Anyone can join. And 2 new players joined who didn't understand our coalition chain and didn't have a perceived notion of why we had this alliance. And this is like World War I. It was like you had Bismarck who created this grand, what was it? The Grand Dance of Europe or something like that. Sorry, it's evading me. But like he had this great diplomatic ties to hold peace in Europe, the Great Orchestra or something. I forgot. And then you have like incompetent monarchs who come in who just like, I don't understand why we got these alliances, blah, blah, blah. And then you just throw everything out of disarray. And then that's how you get world wars. And that's what ended up happening to our coalition. We had 2 new players, and you know exactly what the 2 big states tried to do. They immediately courted them. They offered them provinces. They offered them, hey, you join us. You can take all this side. You guys can take that. And so at the beginning of the second round, the coalition immediately dissolved and we had a war and my nation was blobbed. I was eaten. I gave it a good fight, but I was blobbed and my nation was gone. And I was like, well, you survived the first round. You accomplished your mission. And it was a great lesson. That's the weakness of democracies is that our leadership is changing constantly. And if you have a pariah state and that lasts, his scale is in decades. Our scale is in like, we have 4 years. I have 4 years to come up with a foreign policy and try to implement something. He has decades. Putin has decades. Not physically anymore. He's about to die. I can't imagine that guy actually thinking he has another decade in office. But he had 2 decades. He had 2 decades to come up with his ideas like, all right, I want to take over Ukraine. And you can, in a 2-decade span, when your opponents are democracies, that's possible because we have cooldown timers. Our cooldown timers for aggression is a lot faster because you see what Trump wants to do. He wants to bring Putin back into the fold. He wants to bring him in from the cold. That's what the BBC is phrasing it, bringing him back in from the cold. If there's anything the EU needs to do, it is almost to give a guarantee that Putin cannot come back in. That needs to be the guarantee. There needs to be a fundamental shift in how we categorize Russia right now. Russia can no longer be like, we want to bring them back in. No, they are permanently cast out of this institution until, like I said, we had these parameters like, all right, you need to return Ukraine's territory. It's a whittling away. I think that's the easiest way of saying it is that Russia can whittle away. Russia has the time to whittle away. And Trump he doesn't care. He doesn't mind. To him, this isn't his problem. Europe isn't his concerns. This sort of stuff is not on his mind. So it's on Europe now. Honestly, I think it does say best. Europe needs to change. Europe needs to come to terms that the U.S. is no longer going to be the binding agent for some sort of security guarantees. Germany must modernize its military bureaucracy. Is I always read about just the absurd like inefficiency of their military right now. It's you guys are all going to have to come together and start trying to figure out some cohesive foreign policy, or else Putin's just going to dismantle you state by state. What is it? Divide and conquer. That's it. That's the name of the game. You divide and you conquer. That's their goal. And so the objective is to be binded, to stay a binded nation or a binded group that has a commitment, understanding about the consequences if you guys actually let them break you apart. All right, guys, that's it for Florida, man. I got some stuff to do today. Have a good time. Stay safe out there.